Hello and welcome back. In this short lecture, we're going to learn about how to create endpoint protection related profile from device configuration. So just point to Microsoft Intune and go to device configuration and click on profiles, and here you can click here create profile and give a meaningful name, and then choose the platform as Windows 10 or later. Under the select configuration type, you can choose here as the endpoint protection. When you choose here endpoint protection, you would have different settings related to Windows Defender application guard, as well as Defender Firewall and Defender Smart Screen, encryption. All of these categories have different settings altogether. So let's begin with Windows Defender application guard. In this, if you're trying to configure for any kind of Windows 32 component activation related, you can configure here for enable for Edge. And then the behavior for the clipboard, you can configure allow copy or block, or just the one way you want to copy paste. All that can be configured, including the printing type. You want to configure any of the printers, then you can choose whether you want to print that specific applications or you want to block it. These kind of configurations can be done directly from the endpoint protection. And going back to the Defender Firewall, Windows Defender Firewall has a 44 different settings, and out of that, there are a few of the settings are very important. For example, since it's nothing but your firewall, you need to know what kind of policies are configured under domain. For example, under domain, you can choose here and you can look at here. It's still loading. Yeah, you can say that stealth mode is configured, or IPsec should be enabled, or any of the additional rules to be allowed. You can configure here like allow, block. All these settings are more critical, and if you want to configure any of the new rules, you can create up to 150 rules as in date. Let's say example, you want to configure a specific address, maybe a port like a SQL port to be open. You can configure from here by giving it some name. For example, this rule would be SQL port, and I'm sorry, SQL port, and I can give here the direction would be the inbound, which is action should be allow, and I'm giving the network type would be the domain here, and I'm going to here choose the application or maybe a path or any of that. So in my case, I can give here the specific IP address range or the port. So in my case, it could be just the TCP port, and the port would be a specific port called 1433, and this port I wanted to allow. So I can simply choose as this, and if there is any of the remote ports, you can choose that specific port. If not, simply select OK. So it's going to create in your firewall as this additional rule. So this eliminates your on-premises additional firewall policies to be created. So this way you can easily create and manage Windows Defender firewall related configuration. Let's also have a look on Windows Defender Smart Screen. So I'm just canceling that and going to the smart screen. So this would actually scans the required files and file types and file extensions for the smart screen protection. If you want to choose, you can choose, or you can leave as a default. Windows encryption. This Windows encryption is nothing but more of your settings related to BitLocker. So whatever the prerequisites are there, that all can be almost configured from your configuration related to the Windows encryption, or the BitLocker configuration can be done from here. Let's say you want to configure your devices to be encrypted. You can simply take this and the storage card or mobile only. So for example, this specific setting is only apply for the mobile devices. On your mobile devices, if you have the external SD card or the memory card, you can completely encrypt that specific entire mobile phone also along with that storage card. And now BitLocker based settings. These are the settings are related to whether you want to warning for other disk encryption, or you want to configure any of the methods. Let's say I want to configure my BitLocker. In that situation, I can enable here and choose my encryption methods. So when I say encryption methods here, encryption for operating system drives. So I'm going to choose this XTS BitLocker encryption of 128, or maybe XTS 256, high end of my encryption method. Similar things can be configured, but make sure that these kind of nodes which is giving here maybe sometimes more valuable. For example, here device enabled with the automatic encryption will require encryption before changing the encryption method. That means already if you have the devices that definitely to be decrypted, and then it should be encrypted. So such configurations you can configure here. And for the BitLocker, for the TPM pin, you can configure here a low TPM with a pin, or maybe with some kind of startup key, all that kind of configuration you can do it. So if you are quite new to the Intune, maybe if you never worked on the BitLocker, these settings might be completely new for you. But if you know the settings, you can easily configure. If you don't know, or if you never configure these BitLocker related settings with your on premises, it would be maybe hard for you, and you may have to learn from scratch. I'm sorry for that, but that's how it works, because Intune is the interface which gives you the options where you can directly configure from your cloud console. But what are those settings and how they are gonna effective, you should have an idea already, so that you can easily configure. Now let's jump into the Windows Defender, especially for the exploit guard. This attack surface reduction is basically useful to configure or to block the suspicious executable files, or maybe some kind of macros or scripts, or something is coming from email. You can block it, or you can audit them if you want, and that kind of settings can be configured under these settings. So these are around 15 different settings are available. Let's load. You can also configure here a ransom related configuration. You can check out here advanced ransom protection also can be configured. You can simply enable this setting so that anything which is abnormally behaving, the folder encryption, that treated as a ransomware, and these settings can be configured. And also you can block some kind of scripts which are coming from your macros, or maybe VBS files execution, or maybe psexec, or from the WMI commands. All that kind of settings can be configured, or LO, or just the audit only, so that you know what is happening when you check it as the audit. So now let's have a look on control folder access. Under control folder access, it automatically blocks access to content in a protected folders, and this can be enabled in audit or block mode. Let's configure here as the enable. These two specific settings, one for the application level protection, other one would be the folder level protection, will protect you from ransomware basically. So anything like a specific malicious code is trying to encrypt or trying to do the modification to your applications, it can block. So here you need to give your application name, which is the application name.exe. For example, if it is a winword.exe, you can give the winword.exe related full path. Similarly, in a critical folder, maybe users profile data, or maybe some other folder which is very critical for the company's data maybe the users are trying to store. In that situation, you can give that folder so that it is fully protected from malicious codes which are trying to encrypt in the background. Very similar to the ransomware behavior can be stopped. So these are the settings. Let's go back to the network filter. Network filtering is basically you can to filter out your background connection of any of the application which is coming from a low repeated IP addresses, or maybe low repeated domain. So this is an intelligent way. It's going to verify whether this specific application is really accessing for the known networks or to the hackers network. That's what it's going to verify. And you can configure here from the enable, so that it's going to enable. And if you choose only audit only, it's going to be only enable auditing purpose. And coming back to the Windows Defender applications, you do have here the Defender application control, which works very similar to the network control behavior, but it is specific to the applications. Let's say if I configure here as enable, and if I choose as enable, what it's gonna do is, if the application is not trusted, it's based on its own reputation, it's gonna block it. So that's where it's gonna trusted applications only will be running on that specific machine. And I'm just moving to the other settings like Windows Defender credential guard. This specific setting is more related to the virtualization for the security purpose. If you are enabling the credential guard, you can enable or you can configure those VMs to only work with UEFI mode with the enable as a lock, or maybe without the UEFI, so that the VMs nobody can copy the entire hard disk, and it may not work if the VM is moved from one actual host to another host. So that way you can protect it very well with the Defender credential guard. And let's move to the other settings which is related to the Windows Defender Security Center. So this is where it's going to ask you for the TPM related IT contact information and your ransomware behavior. All that kind of settings can be configured from your security center. For example, virus and threat protection you want to configure, you can say you can hide it, the configuration, and so that it's not going to show you. And similarly, account configuration, you can hide it. So these are the basically a security center notification where it's going to pop up in your taskbar. So those settings are, if you want to completely block those notifications, you can do it from here. And let's move to the other one, local device security options. So this is very critical. Most of the companies, they would definitely follow these specific settings related to the local device security options. Now you can look at here, add new Microsoft account. You want to block it, or you want to add, or you want to allow them to add some more of the Microsoft accounts to be added. So you have the options like rename your built-in account. You can do it by giving here the account name, so that's going to be the account will be automatically renamed the local administrative account. Similarly, guest account, you want to block it as a security policy, you can do that. You can also rename the guest account. You can do these specific settings and accounts. Now let's move to the devices. Coming back to the devices, these devices are more specific to your configuration of your hardware. For example, if the docking station it's already connected this specific device, but you want to log in without login, you want to undock that machine, you can do that. Or you want to block your CD-ROM access, or maybe printers, do they users are allowed to install the printers from the shared printers. All that kind of configuration can be enabled or configured here. And also, if you ejected any of the removable media like USB drive, you want to allow them to format and eject based on the right level. For example, just for all the users, or just for the power users, or just for the interactive users. Such configurations can be done from the devices, because these are the endpoint protection level of accessing. So there will be a limited settings which can be configured from the devices. Now interactive logon, which is this interactive logon, like how many minutes you wanna inactivity until the screensaver to be activated. That means the automatically maybe 5 minutes, or maybe whatever the minutes you are going to configure. Post to that, if it is inactive, then it will be prompting for the username and the password to be entered. Similarly, if users needs to enter Ctrl-Alt-Del to log in, you can configure this specific setting. And also smart card removal behavior, you can configure the smart card for the additional level of security when they are trying to log on. And display related settings for the interactive lock on. Now, users information on the lock screen, do you want to allow them to show you that information? If so, like display name and the domain name and the usernames, you want to display them, or you don't want to display anything. So that they have to as a mandatory, they have to enter the username and the password and the domain name, and that way it will be more secure. So the next setting would be the hide last logon name. Whoever last logged on, do you want to show them, or you want to enter, and the user must have to enter the right name and then only log in. So you don't want to pre-populate the username, then you can configure that hide option. and hide username at the sign-in time. You can do that. And the login message, if you want, if you have any kind of settings you want to like welcome message maybe for the users, such information can be configured here. For the title and the text message can be used so that that information will be populated when a user tries to log in. For example, I can give here welcome to my company name, and maybe I can give here make sure that it should be for only authenticated persons. Such information can be a big story I can write up here. Let's move to the other settings like network access and security. To configure this network access and security, like you want to allow them to access anonymous access to named pipes, you can block it. You can do the specific configuration. Anonymous enumeration for SAM accounts. All of these specific settings can be configured based on your requirements and the network as well as the security configurations and as per your design document. So here you can check out here LAN manager authentication level also. Do you want to just depend on NTLM v2 or just the use LAN manager as well as NTLM? So these kind of configurations can be configured from here. Let's also look at the recovery console shutdown option. In this options, you have the two settings. One would be the clearing page file information when it is actually shutting down, so that nothing will be written in on the disk, so it can be fast booted, or if you're going to the recovery mode, you'll not be having any of the problems. And there's another option also here, shutdown logon without login. That means when you press Ctrl Del, the option will be given to you to shut down even without the logging to the machine. So this might be useful sometime configuration, so you can configure here. Let's go to the UAC settings, which is nothing but UAC stands as user access control. Like whenever you're trying to perform some kind of administrative access might be required, then it will be prompting you, hey, you're trying to access something which is critical, or the admin component or the core component of Windows. In that situation, it's going to be prompted. So that behavior you can configure here: evolution prompt for the admins and evolution prompt for the shared users. So it's going to be automatically deny, or you want to prompt it, or prompt for the credentials. All that kind of information can be configured from here. So if you are trying to do anything with the UAC settings, you can do it from here, user access control settings for the endpoint protection. Now we'll also jump into the Microsoft Network Client, which is nothing but digitally signing for the communication level, or you wanna only send an encrypted password to the third-party SMB servers. All that kind of configuration can be configured here. Now let's move to Microsoft Network Server. So this is Network Server, and this is for the Network Client. So both the communications are very much required, and you need to configure properly if you're trying to use some kind of encryption, or you wanna use some kind of digitally communication. Is you're trying to enable, make sure that the required configuration is really configured properly. For example, here Microsoft Network Server is digitally signed communication if client agrees, or you can configure always to be digitally signed. So this kind of configuration can be enabled. So maybe other side, the client is always expected the configuration must be digitally secure and signed kind of communication can be established. This is all about the local device security options. Let's move to the Xbox services. Coming back to the Xbox services, you can have a look on Xbox services. In this Xbox services, you want to configure any of the settings, simply enable that. Once you enable that specific setting, you have the accessory management settings, like you want to automatic, you want to allow, or you want to configure live authentication manager service. You can do it live gaming and the save service, or live networking services can be configured here. If you are familiar with the Xbox services, you might have know all these settings, and then you can easily configure. If you are quite new to the Xbox services, you may have to check out all these services when they are used. Once I have all these settings are configured, I can click OK and click OK. I can give here the proper name for this specific services. For example, I can give here as the endpoint specific settings, and then I can apply for the required SUDD group. Just given here the full name, then create, and once it is created, it will be taken to the assignment blade. If you can see here, it's moved to the assignments, and I can assign for the required groups. Maybe I can say that a specific group which I'm looking for, maybe finance users, I can give that finance users should apply the specific group, or this specific setting should be applied for the specific group.